I call this meeting of the Rotary Club of Oakland to order. I'm Dudley Thompson, and I have the great honor to serve as the president of the Rotary Club of Oakland. Founded in 1908, we are the third established club of some 36,000 Rotary clubs in over 200 countries around the world. We're a diverse community of some 270 local business, professional, and community leaders who unite to improve local and international communities through a common commitment of service above self. For over 113 years, we've welcomed Rotarians and guests to our club meetings, and I welcome you to this, our 5,375th meeting. If you're a visiting Rotarian or a guest of a Rotarian, please enter your name in the chat box located in the center of the bottom of the screen so we can recognize you in a few minutes. We recommend you view today's meeting using Speaker View. It's located in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. If you have comments or want to ask a question of the speaker, please use the chat box. Today we recognize the upcoming President's Day national holiday. For our thought for the day, I welcome Rotary District Assistant Governor and our club member, Joe Goralka, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and the thought for the day.
Good afternoon, all. In honor of President's Day, please join me as you are willing in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So before the thought for today, the day today, I want to tell you, today is my wife Martha's birthday and our wedding anniversary, a mystical, magical day. So first I need to say happy birthday, Martha. I think she might be out there, and much love to my much better half on our anniversary. As we head into President's Day weekend, thought a couple quotes from former presidents would be appropriate, and a couple quotes on gratitude in honor of our upcoming gala. So here are 5 short quotes. Do what you can with what you have where you are, by Theodore Roosevelt. This is a world of compensations, and he who would be no slave must consent to have no slave. Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves, and under a just God cannot long retain it, by Abraham Lincoln. If not us, who? If not now, when? By John F. Kennedy. Think this expresses well the reasons we give back. We learned about gratitude and humility, that so many people had a hand in our success, by Michelle Obama. And I just happen to like this one. Happiness is the only good. The time to be happy is now. The place to be happy is here. The way to be happy is to make others happy, by Robert Ingersoll, and a favorite of John Ely, my father-in-law, who was always in the mood for gratitude. And coincidentally, it's his birthday in spirit today too. Please enjoy President's Day weekend, stay safe and be happy, and be in the mood for gratitude.
Thank you, Joe. Please give Martha our best today, and I had the great honor of being at your wedding. It was a wonderful day.
Thank you.
So our decision to continue club meetings online through the month of February, and it will be through the first week of March. Right now we anticipate coming back on the 10th of March to the California Ballroom. We'll continue to plan club events, and we'll share some of those with you that are outdoors or in large open spaces, and you'll hear about those today. Last week, we had a very special program on the color of ballet with Angela Watson of the San Francisco Ballet Student Training Program. She was joined by one of her former teachers, Reginald Savage, and also one of the principals of the Harlem Dance, the Dance Theater of Harlem. It was a great program. This week, we welcome Mitchell Schwarzer, Professor of Architectural and Urban History of the California College of Arts. He'll talk about the intersection of building, transportation, deals and schemes, and how that's affected the life and culture of Oakland. Ed Jellin, are you out there?
I am, President Dudley.
I understand, that was your favorite song we played before the meeting today.
It was one of my very favorite songs, and indeed my very favorite Rotary song for sure. Anyway, we do have some visiting Rotarians with us today. Joe Goralka had already introduced his guests, our birthday anniversary girl, Martha Goralka. But what Joe didn't mention is that she's a member of the Rotary Club of Delta Antioch. And so always nice to have you with us, Marcia, and thank you for attending. And then we're honored today to have the president of the San Francisco Chinatown Rotary Club, and that is Richard Schwartz. So Richard, thank you for coming to our meeting. Great to have you and hope you enjoy the meeting. And that's what I have, President Dudley.
Thank you, Ed. Sandeep Rajbandari, you're sponsoring our meeting today. How about telling us a little bit about Local Foods Cali?
Yes, thank you so much, Dudley. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody. It's a great opportunity to be here. Hello, everybody. My name is Sandeep Rajbandari. I am the CEO and founder of Local Foods. We are a health food delivery service company that is based here in Oakland, California, and are focused in providing highly customizable, individually packaged, healthy meals that are ready to heat and eat. Great thing about ordering meals from Local Foods is that we give you the tools to customize your order to whatever diet you want to eat. You can customize your meals to fit your diet by different portion sizes and nutritional facts. In addition to all of that, each meal comes with a full nutritional fact label, so you know exactly what you're eating and where your meals are coming from. Meals are cooked, prepared, and delivered the same day, so you know you're always getting fresh meals. I'm personally very passionate about eating healthy and living a very healthy lifestyle, since I struggled with weight management and being sick at a very young age. So when I started this company, I knew this is exactly what I wanted to do. At Local Foods, we care about health and wellness on a holistic level, not just food. So we also spend a lot of time and resources, frequently posting blog posts by qualified health industry professionals on our blog site as well. I started this business in 2014 with 2 other partners, but since then we've grown to about a business of about 15 people with aspirations to grow nationally. I'd like all my fellow Rotarians to try Local Foods. Ordering is very simple. You can just go to our website, localfoods.co, which I'll put on the chat box later, or download our mobile app. Some Rotary news. We recently partnered with TNT Strength and Fitness to offer it as a pickup location for our meals if you don't want to get your meals delivered to your home. And as you know, TNT Strength is also owned by a fellow Rotarian, Jesse Smith, who I would like to invite now to talk about how our partnership was formed and give you guys a little testimonial about the service that is Local Foods. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, Sandeep. It's my pleasure to give you and Local Foods a glowing review, literally and figuratively. As a certified nutritionist, I can say that the food that Local is delivering to people is high quality and delicious. TNT has gotten set up as a pickup location for this awesome food. And so we're very excited that our clients now have this resource to turn to so that they can get healthy meals. It's great because we're all so busy and pressed for time. So these meals, you just pop them in the microwave. If you're having a crazy week, then you don't have to worry about cooking a meal or going to the grocery store. You just pop it in the microwave and eat it. And not to mention their app and their website are very user friendly. So it's just really easy to get your hands on good, quality, healthy food. So thank you very much, Sandeep. We're excited to partner with you.
Thank you very much, Jesse.
Thank you, Sandeep, for sponsoring the meeting today, and thank you, Jesse, for that testimonial and working out a deal with Sandeep. So, Robert Kidd, you're going to reintroduce one of our special members today. Would you take the podium here?
Hi. Hello, President Dudley. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine.
We're having a connection problem with our guest of honor, so I'm going to ask that we put this off until she can come online. And if we don't work things out today, we'll postpone it to another day.
Okay.
Sorry.
We'll find time here, hopefully a little bit later in the meeting. Nancy Williams, are you out there?
Did you hear that?
So, Robert, can I ask you to mute? There you go. So, Nancy, Martha Goralka is not the only person with a birthday today either, but that's not why you're here, but happy birthday, Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you for telling my secret. So
It's not a secret. It's kind of everywhere.
Okay.
You're a social media maven, so.
Got it. Well, thank you very much. But hi, everyone. Today we're here to talk about our next very special event. We hope every one of you enjoyed the Color of Ballet panel last week. That was actually the first of our 2 Rotary Club of Oakland events honoring Black History Month 2022. And now we're officially 1 week out from our second event, the documentary film screening of Evolutionary Blues, West Oakland's Music Legacy, on Thursday, February 24th at the Grand Lake Theater. You can hear the firsthand stories of over 30 artists who regularly played in clubs and music venues that line the streets of West Oakland. These interviews are both candid and zealous, and some musicians are even moved to tears when recalling their passion for singing and playing music from that was often excluded talent and creativity of Black artists. And while the film primarily focuses on the musicians, it also incorporates the social movements and socioeconomic developments that dramatically shaped and affected West Oakland, including the end of World War II, the rise of restrictive covenants and redlining, and the Black Panthers. You really don't want to miss this. Doors will open at 6 p.m. and the film starts at 7. Immediately following the screening, we're honored to have the film's director, Cheryl Fabio, spend time with us for a short Q&A. And a quick shout out to Dave Kirsten, our fellow Rotarian, who recently interviewed Ms. Fabio on his Ripple Effect podcast. You can watch that podcast on the Rotary Club of Oakland's Facebook page. A limited number of tickets are on sale now for just $14 on Eventbrite. There will be no on-site ticket sales, so you must purchase them prior to the event, so stop holding out on us. As of today, we've sold 80 tickets through Eventbrite, but we need much more to take this event to the next level. This is a great event to bring your friends, family, neighbors, and colleagues to. Also consider inviting someone that you think would make a great member of our club. Our membership team will be out in force, sharing their Rotary experience and answering questions about Rotary. For group ticket sales of 10 or more, please contact Jesse Battle. And speaking of groups, an extra special shout out to fellow Rotarian Ruth Stroop for sponsoring 60, yes, 60 of Edna Brewer Middle School students and families to attend our screening. So which one of you Rotarians are going to beat Ruth's ticket sales? Do you know groups such as the Boys and Girls Club, adults with special needs, choirs, bands? If so, consider purchasing a group of tickets and donating them. Full vaccination status is required, including booster. We will be checking vaccination cards at the door, as well as requiring masks and social distancing so that everyone remains safe. And as I mentioned last week, we will be serving wine, courtesy of our president, Dudley Thompson. And to add even more fun to the evening, we'll be having a Rotary Club of Oakland photo backdrop, where you can take fun photos with fellow members, create great memories, post and share to social media so that people can be jealous that they're not at this cool Rotary event. So come early, again, doors open at 6, grab a glass of wine and enjoy. And I'll end here with a bell ring for Ruth Strout and we will hope to see everyone there.
Thank you very much, Nancy. Got a bell here. I just got the Rotary bell back this week, so I don't have to ring my cowbell anymore.
Perfect timing, perfect timing.
Thank you very much, Nancy. And for anyone who's new to the club, a bell ringer is a generous $100 gift to the Oakland Rotary Endowment. I have a couple of announcements here of upcoming things going on. Because Robert Kidd was going to be talking about the reintroduction here, he'd asked me to remind you of the hike coming up on Sunday, February 27th. It's through Richmond Wildcat Canyon. And this is the first of 4 walks through June. And those walks will take us from Richmond all the way down to Hayward across the hills. So please join us for that hike on February 27th. We're just putting together about 3 years ago, 2019, during the Oakland Marathon, we teamed up to hand out water during the Oakland Marathon. And we're just talking with the organizers, and it looks like we will be taking responsibility for 2 of the water stations. And so I'm not sure if Jesse has it set up. We were just talking about it today or yesterday evening, but on the website on March 20th is the Oakland Marathon. Oakland Running Day, I think is the name of the day. And please sign up for volunteering to hand out water during the event. We'll volunteer for like 3 hours at a time. It's like a 6-hour period that will have the water stations open. So we're going to have some interactors join us. So please sign up for that. International Women's Day event with the district is coming up on March 13th on Sunday. It's a great event, and there's information both on our website as well as on the district website of registering for that event. And then the district convention is coming up April 22nd through the 24th. One of our guests today, Richard Schwartz, is from the Oakland Chinatown Club, and they're generously, they and the San Francisco Chinatown Club, they and the San Francisco Rotary Club are generously donating 600 pocket alarms for the Asian community in Oakland, and we'll be putting together a day to hand out those alarms. We're still negotiating that a little bit, but be aware, and we look forward to joining with the San Francisco Chinatown Club, and hopefully we'll be able to put that together with the Oakland Chinatown Chamber and local service organizations. And did I say finally, don't forget to go on the Red Cross Blood app and sign up and donate some blood. We're still in a blood donation crisis, and please go down. Just takes a little bit of time. The hardest part is finding an appointment these days, but they are available, and please do that. And let Jesse know when you do that, because we're keeping track of those people. It's a district event to try to get everybody to donate. Okay, I guess, Robert, did Alita make it?
Alita is in the house.
Okay, we have the time here to, let's go ahead, and why don't you, I guess we've given away who we're introducing, but would you
just did that.
Well, President Dudley, thank you. I'm pleased today to reintroduce Alita Scola, a member of our Rotary Club since 2006. Alita grew up in Audubon, New Jersey, population 9,500, or as Alita recalls, population 9,500 white Republicans. Alita attended college in New Jersey and then Maryland. In 1975, she and her partner Lisa drove their Volkswagen camper out to, where else? San Francisco. Within days of arriving, she paid a courtesy call on a woman who was the aunt of a friend of Alita's in New Jersey. That woman was Del Martin, co-founder of the Daughters of Bilitis and an iconic leader of the lesbian community in San Francisco and beyond. As they met, Del cut to the chase. She asked Alita, "Do you want a job?" And so it was within days of arriving in San Francisco, Alita became a social and political activist for the San Francisco Commission for the Status of Women. What followed were nonstop meetings in and out of City Hall, in the neighborhoods, in the lesbian community and beyond. While the work was exciting and meaningful, after 2 years, Alita was totally burned out on politics and politicking. And so she moved on to a job with an art framer on 24th Street in the city. Alita recalls it was the best job she's ever had. 4 days of working and learning her craft, followed by 3 days of partying and exploring Northern California. But inspired by her father, who owned a barber shop in Audubon, Alita always wanted her own business. And that was when serendipity intervened once again. Through a friend, Alita met a woman here in Oakland who was selling her framing shop. And although Alita had no interest in leaving the city, she visited the frame shop and immediately decided to buy. Alita and Galleria Scola have been on Grand Avenue ever since. Through her new business, Alita has met many customers who coincidentally were also members of the Rotary Club of Oakland. And she was impressed by their commitment to Rotary's core values and their devotion of time and treasure to those values. But she couldn't quite bring herself to join Rotary. Then one day in 2006, Alita shared her dilemma with one of her Rotary customers. While she appreciated Rotarians' values, joining Rotary just wasn't her thing. In response, the Rotarian customer scoffed. "Oh, Alita, you are already a Rotarian. In fact, Alita, you've always been a Rotarian." And so it was in 2006 that Alita joined our Rotary community. She describes the ensuing 15 years as a love affair with Rotary and all of us who meet to put service above self. Please join me, President Dudley, in welcoming our friend, the Rotarian, Alita Scola.
Alita, as you know, having been a member for a while, if we were in the ballroom, you would have everybody there standing up, applauding, clapping, trying to give you all the appreciation that you so deserve. So thank you so much for joining us today and telling, the part of this is learning people's stories. Usually we wait until people die, and it's like, you go to a memorial service and you learn all those things. It's so wonderful to learn all about people and where they're from now. I want to say a few words because I'm going to start ringing the bell here. There are people that love you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, Robert. What he didn't say is that he's the one who made me join Rotary. He asked me about 30 times, and 30 times I said, forget it. No, I'm not doing it. It's not going to happen. The fat old white guys, no, not into it. So anyway, eventually I did, and then I fell in love with the whole pack of everybody, and it's been a great adventure, for which I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Great. So Alita, just a few people out here are going to start ringing the bell for you, and I'm going to read them, and then a little bit later we'll see if there's some that I miss. But I have one from a person you might know because I think he's a pretty good customer of yours. And another person down there on Grand, Jack McAvoy, rings the bell for you. There we go. Alex Polson rings the bell. Bob Breaker rings the bell for you. I got to get this thing ringing better. Seth Butner rings the bell for you. Karen Friedman rings the bell for you. Rick Draper rings the bell for you. Ruth Straub rings the bell for you. Jim and Linda Bosenecker ring the bell for you. Lois Corin rings the bell for you. Let's see. Jean Raines. Mary Rudser rings the bell. Joyce E. Mack rings the bell. David Douglas rings the bell for his favorite framer. Stephanie Cosenza rings the bell for you. Jason Weiselman says, of course, so I'm assuming that's a bell ringer, Jason. Tom Lamone rings the bell. Sandeepa rings the bell. Isaac Koss rings the bell. Ed Jellin rings the bell. And I'm going to get in line here, and Dudley Thompson rings the bell. Okay.
Don't forget Peter Sherris.
Did we see Peter Sherris there? Did I miss him?
Yes.
Okay, Peter Sherris.
And Joe Goralka.
Joe Goralka rings the bell. I think I haven't got down that far. Let's see. Isaac Koss Reed rings the bell. Did I say Ed Jellin? Georgia Richardson rings the bell. Robert Kidd rings the bell. Ralph Sklar rings the bell. There we go. Anyway, we'll come back to this because I'm sure there'll be.
Just say everybody rings the bell.
Okay. We got 76 people on here.
Wow.
Okay. If you want to do it, we'll come back to it. Just put it into the chat, and we'll get to that. Thank you so much, Elita. I'm so proud to have you as a friend. Thank you, and as a Rotarian. Your relationship is just warm and wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Steve Nichols, would you introduce our speaker for the day?
Certainly. Thank you, President Dudley. Hope everybody can hear me. We're going to extend a warm virtual welcome this afternoon to Mitchell Schwarzer. Professor Schwarzer comes to us from, as Dudley mentioned, from the California Arts, College of Arts, of the Arts. And what Dudley didn't say is that he's written extensively on architectural history, planning, and design. And his latest book, a great title, it's called Hellatown. And I think everybody in Rotary should be encouraged to read it because we all live and work around here. And it's a really interesting history of why and what has happened in Oakland. And you know, as a retired builder, I know that the buildings, the infrastructure, the transportation systems of any city will give us that kind of keyhole view of our history. So next time you're wandering around an Aztec or a Mayan or a Greek city, think about urban planning and why people did what they did. I think you'll find that the urban layout will give you a sort of view of the social, the political, maybe even a racial perspective on how people lived. Anyway, let's hear from Mitchell about Oakland. Go for it, Mitchell.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for that nice introduction. Thank you to the Rotary Club for inviting me. This is what the book looks like, Hellatown, and came out last September. What I'd like to start off is maybe segueing from what Steve said. I think, overall, the goal of this book is to give people a deeper context, a deeper perspective on the place that they live, so that when they are driving or walking around or cycling around Oakland, when they're visiting people in other parts of the country and talking about Oakland, they can actually talk from a place of knowledge about the history, the things you can't see day to day, but the things that influence the day to day. So a goal I'm trying to encourage is for people to be more curious about where they live. And by being more curious about where they live, taking a greater interest in learning about where they live, and adopting a greater sense of responsibility for the city in which they inhabit or visit or plan to visit. Town basically has a history of Oakland's built environment. That is to say, architecture, buildings, parks, infrastructure, landscape, transportation routes, the physical city in which we live. And as such, it covers not the entire history of Oakland. That was a little bit daunting, but basically the period I would call the modern history of Oakland, from the 1890s, when streetcars got underway, around the turn of the 20th century and the time of the earthquake, when Oakland started growing dramatically because of the temporary exodus of San Franciscans across to the East Bay, to the period right on the edge of the First World War, when Oakland starts industrializing. Okay, so that's the beginnings are in that period from the 1890s to the First World War. And I take it up to the period of the Great Recession. So around 2008, 2009. And then there's a coda at the end, which talks about developments, especially over the last 5 years, leading right up to the pandemic. The pandemic was just happening as I was writing the final words of the book. It's organized in functional categories. So there are discussions of housing, workplace, civic buildings, shopping places, parks and recreation, and a lot on transportation, from freeways to road networks, bridges, tunnels, BART, the old streetcar network, ferries, you name it. What I'd like to talk about today is just one aspect of the book. I think a kind of important set of observations I came up with in writing the book. If you look at Oakland, roughly, I think, and this has been a common perspective on the city, there's this kind of amazing growth from the time of the Transcontinental Railroad, right, when Oakland becomes a railroad center, and all the way up through the period, I would say, almost 100 years, up through the 1950s and maybe the early 1960s. And then there's this period of decline that follows from sometime in the late 50s through the end of the 20th century, and then later a revival after the election of Jerry Brown and the development of the onset of the 10K plan, bringing residents downtown, et cetera. So what I'd like to talk about is the kind of intersection between those two first periods, the kind of era of ascendance and the period of decline. And so this is occurring, I would say, from the late 1940s into the early 1960s, kind of a pivotal period in Oakland's history. It's pivotal for a lot of reasons. A lot of things have changed in mid-century around this time. One is, up until the late 30s, government, state, municipal, federal, took very little role in urban development, right? The only thing government really has done up until this time is build municipal buildings, like civic buildings, like City Hall, the Municipal Auditorium, and a few others. But as far as responsibility for other factors, not at all. For instance, the streetcar network, the key system, was completely privately financed, privately managed, privately built. And that goes for housing, workplace, and a lot of other areas. So there's a shift starting during the Roosevelt administration, the New Deal in the 30s, toward greater government involvement in city making. And that shift really accelerates after the war as well, in the 50s with the interstate highway system. And then we'll talk about with urban renewal, with freeway construction, with BART, and on a whole lot of other projects. So that kind of shift toward the government that occurs. Another big shift is demography. Audiences are often really surprised when I tell them that Oakland, through the early decades of the 20th century, was largely inhabited by people of European origin. It was over 90% white up until the early 1940s, over 90%. So there were small Asian, Latino, and Black populations, but together they count in 1940 about 7%. of the city. That's all. And because of that, one could argue that the opportunities for a person in Oakland up through this period apply to most Oaklanders, right? Because most Oaklanders are white. The barriers to participation in all aspects of life that constitute what we would call the American dream, like getting the house or living situation you want, the job you want, the schools you want for your kids, a safe neighborhood, these didn't apply to the non-whites, and I'll get into that. After 1940, the demography really changes dramatically. There's two big moments, right? The first is the second great migration of Blacks from the South to the West, which starts right on the onset of the Second World War. And Oakland's Black population goes from about 2.6% in 1940 to over 48% in 1980, right? Almost, it's a plurality by 1980. Huge population increase. And then later, starting in the 70s, an enormous increase in population of Latinos and Asian population, such that today, as most of us know, the city is divided very almost equitably between these four major groups, right? So big demographic change. And lastly, the third major change that that one sees from the early 20th century to the latter 20th century is a change in the city's reliance on industrial jobs, industrial employment, right? Shipbuilding, which was one of the pillars of the Oakland economy, especially during the First World War and Second World War, completely collapses after the Second World War. And by the 1950s, all the shipyards, there were four major shipyards and then about 7 or 8 minor shipyards along the estuary and what we now call the outer harbor. All of them have pretty much gone to repair, and then most of them closed. That's the first casualty and the first sign of deindustrialization. And then starting in the early 1960s, we see a much larger scale deindustrialization that really goes for over 3 decades, really goes from the 60s into the 90s. And it begins with auto assembly. Oakland had 3 major auto assembly plants: Chevrolet, Durant Motors, and other divisions of General Motors. They all eventually became General Motors, but they all moved to Fremont in 1963. And Fagile Motors, which was another big auto assembly plant, moves down the 880 corridor as well in 1962. So Oakland's auto industry and all the associated businesses start to close as well. Canning, which was a big Oakland industry, huge, because much of Alameda County was orchards. Also, as Alameda County suburbanizes, the canneries start to close. And I could go on and talk about the losses, but the losses are tremendous, okay? From the 60s to the 90s. And what I'd like to talk about is an idea that came up in the 40s, okay? And it's really prescient. It really astounds me. It came up in New York City and it came up in the Bay Area. New York City Regional Plan of the late 1940s and a series of planning efforts by the San Francisco Bay Council, which included the giants of industry at the time, including some Oakland, industries, like Kaiser Industries, Bechtel Corporation, included as well Southern Pacific Railroad, the major shipping companies like American President Line, PG&E. Most of the companies were in San Francisco, a minority were in Oakland. But what this council of business leaders starts to do, like their New York counterparts, is amazingly plan for deindustrialization and a post-industrial economy before it really has happened. In other words, they see some of the signs early on that San Francisco port is not going to continue the way it has, that perhaps a new kind of port is needed, although containerization is just happening in the late 50s. So it really hasn't occurred yet, but they're starting to see the need for a change in that. They're starting to see that railroads are no longer going to be the backbone of American transportation as they had been for almost 100 years, that highways are going to take over. And this is already, again, the Interstate Highway Act doesn't pass until 1956. So it's a little bit before, although freeways are already being constructed. Our 880 was begun in 1948 and finished in 1958. But the Bay Council sees that. And they see traffic congestion as a big problem. And they are big advocates of both freeway construction and either a second bridge to relieve congestion on the Bay Bridge or a tunnel connected to a rapid transit system, which will become the BART system. And they eventually go with that second option, right? They're the big backers of the BART system, which was originally going to encompass 9 counties, all 9 Bay Area counties, then scaled back to 5 and eventually to 3 by the time 1962, that real serious planning and then later construction begins. And perhaps most significantly, what the Bay Council starts to plan is that the downtowns of both San Francisco and Oakland are change. They see that they need to change. And the basic economic foundations of both cities, where the jobs are going to change. And there's going to be a shift from blue-collar employment with somewhat white-collar employment to largely white-collar employment. Although, and they don't talk about the growth of the service sector, which is going to be like a kind of blue-collar kind of jobs connected to the new office economy. So they see a kind of shift. San Francisco really takes the lead in this. And it encompasses urban renewal, it encompasses BART, it encompasses a lot of things. Urban renewal in the sense that San Francisco looks at its downtown. It wants the Bay Council leaders want to transform San Francisco downtown into an office, colossus. Office buildings hadn't been built since the beginning of the Great Depression in any American city. And they only start getting off the ground in the early 50s in New York City. San Francisco, Crown Zellerbach is one of the first office buildings. Small Bethlehem Steel building is another, late 50s. Oakland doesn't build its first major office building after the war until 1959, when it constructs both the First Interstate and Kaiser buildings. So there's this big drought in office construction. And so San Francisco, the plan for San Francisco is to ramp up office construction by bringing workers in, not just over the Bay Bridge, but also through the BART system, and by sanitizing the areas around downtown San Francisco, by turning them into something amenable to office workers. So the first move is to take the produce market, which is currently where Embarcadero Center and Golden Gateway Apartments are, and to take the land through eminent domain, through redevelopment. This is an urban renewal plan, and construct a completely new type of city quarter in that area, which is the office towers of Embarcadero Center, the shops of Embarcadero Center, and the affluent apartments of Golden Gateway. That's the first move. The second, that's rather successful in terms of what they wanted, not in terms of, let's say, what the city overall needed, but in terms of what the business leaders wanted. The second move is to take Yerba Buena Center, which was really the Siemens district, very working class, poor, and again, seize the land, demolish almost all of it, and plan a hotel, convention center, and cultural district with museums and the like. And that becomes Yerba Buena Center and the Yerba Buena district. That takes a lot longer. In fact, there was an anticipated basketball stadium as well that never occurred. And this has a lot of setbacks, but eventually succeeds again in terms of what San Francisco wanted to do, which was to take the two most demonstrably working class areas next to the downtown and turn them into office, tourism, cultural zones. What about Oakland? Oakland tries, and this is my, I think, one of the great sagas of Oakland, and it's a kind of tragic saga. Oakland tries to do much of the same thing, okay? At the same period, a little bit later perhaps, but along the same lines. Oakland already has developed a very peculiar quixotic plan called the Moap, Metropolitan Oakland Area Plan, which encourages, and this is kind of remarkable, in the 1950s and beyond, suburban firms, industrial firms, to relocate outside of city limits into Alameda County. They don't fight it. They actually encourage it because they see Oakland becoming a kind of command and control center for the entire East Bay. That if industry moves into Contra Costa or further into Alameda County, it will still be connected to Oakland and kind of managed through Oakland somehow. They also plan for a major airport to expand Oakland Municipal Airport all through the 50s, and that finally gets realized by the early 60s. They create their first jet, the jet airport. And most spectacularly, they plan for the container port. They start planning already in the late 50s and early 60s. The first container crane actually in the history of the world was invented and used in Alameda, built by Alameda Company. And these cranes started appearing on the Oakland waterfront in the early 1960s. And by the late 60s, Oakland is the second largest container port in the world for a brief period. It's a really remarkable achievement. So that's the success part. On the other hand, they tried to do something through urban renewal to downtown Oakland, parallel to what San Francisco is doing. And what they tried to do is basically, again, the similar goal, to sanitize downtown, to turn it from a kind of mixed area of poor people, working class people, middle class, to upper middle class, and then office workers. And the plan encompasses, and this is where really things are very different. Instead of doing it on the edges of the financial district, as San Francisco had done, in Oakland, the plan actually is done everywhere, almost, okay? There's a big urban renewal plan called City Center that occurs, the demolition occurs in 1970. That's right in the heart of the city, okay? It's 18 blocks in the core of Oakland, from 11th to 14th, from Broadway to what is now 980. They take out almost everything. And it's a complete failure because the plan was to have a 5-anchor mall, shopping mall, right there, with ramps from 980 directly into the mall, with Bullock's, Macy's, JCPenney's, Capwell's, and another store. I mean, they revolve. There's lots of iterations of the plan. Mall never happens. Plan is also to have a whole phalanx of private office buildings around it. 2 are built early on only. The Wells Fargo and Clorox building by Cesar Pelli, right along Broadway. Most of the site, most of those 18 blocks are vacant for years and years and years, some for decades. It's largely a failure. But alongside it, there's other plans, a corridor plan for high-rise residential upper middle-class housing downtown that never gets off the ground. And then there's another plan, 2 of them, for urban renewal in West Oakland, right adjacent to downtown Oakland, the Acorn urban renewal and the Oak Center urban renewal. And both of those occur. The first, the Acorn, is largely slum clearance. So it's again, clearance of hundreds, in this case, scores of blocks, 6,000 residents permanently displaced, hundreds of buildings demolished. And in its place was supposed to be a middle income community of Black and white residents. It doesn't happen. The white residents basically move out after a couple of years because whites have been moving to the suburbs ever since the late 40s for those, toward those new developments that are occurring across Alameda and Contra Costa County, because they can. They're allowed to. The developments are advertised as 100% white in many cases. There are covenants and federal laws through the through the Federal Housing Administration to make that happen. Blacks can't. So these privately financed urban renewal in both Acorn and Oak Center become largely Black by the late 1960s, and akin to housing projects. And beset with a lot of the problems that occurred. So in concluding, what Oakland, it's a really interesting case of, on the one hand, tremendous prescience by business leaders that a post-industrial economy was going to occur, okay? And at the same time, incredible callousness or ignorance on the part, especially on the part of Oakland leaders, that trying to do this kind of plan in Oakland in the 1960s, given the population and given the economic structure of the economy in Oakland, was not going to happen. Oakland was not going to get the tourists. It was not going to get those, that level of office development that San Francisco had, especially when San Francisco, where you were competing head on with San Francisco, that people could BART right under Oakland on their way to San Francisco and not get off the train in Oakland and just go to San Francisco because it's only 12 to 15 minutes further. So it's a really, I think it's kind of one of the, and if you think about what I began with, that dual discussion of, the early century of growth and then the second century and the changing demography in the two parts and deindustrialization. This is kind of the great planning effort that encompassed both business leaders and the government, the Oakland Redevelopment Agency and federal government, city government, to chart Oakland in the waters that followed, right? That new those new conditions of the second half of the 20th century. And it really didn't work out at all. It really worked out badly. And that really is part of the reason for a lot of the problems Oakland has faced, right, in the 80s, 90s, and even in some cases still faces today. It's probably the single greatest moment, right, if you want to understand the problems that Oakland and the reputation that Oakland got during the latter third of the 20th century. So I thought that would be a good place to that's just one story among many in the book, but it's one that I think is really fascinating and still has a lot of implications today, given our society, given what's going on with our housing crisis, shortage of affordable housing, with our economic inequality in the Bay Area, with transportation issues et cetera.
Thank you, Professor Schwarzer. So one of the questions that here, you don't have a lot of time, but it's kind of the big question, I suppose, for everybody is, from your perspective, Will Hobbs adds, I thoroughly enjoyed the Hellatown book. I'm interested to know your vision expectations for the future now.
Everyone asks about the future to a historian. It's always, the book is about the past, but I think what happened already, I think part of the future has already happened. I think part of it was the Brown administration and the people he worked with starting in 98, right into the early 2000s. And I think what's going on with the Schaff administration right now is basically there hasn't been big, gigantic planning anymore. Part of it's the reason is the government doesn't have the resources to do it, hasn't since the late 70s, right? So there's been a tremendous scaling down of projects. That's good and bad. It's good when the projects that are scaled down don't cause tremendous disruptions as they had in a lot of cases. But on the other hand, Oakland hasn't really added a lot of transportation. We haven't added any line of rail transportation since 1974 in the city of Oakland, right? It's every BART adds on the edge, on the ends, not there hasn't been built a new line. The much discussed second tube under the bay is still a much discussed tube and not really proceeding further. So, and I see that as a big problem. So I think what the future for Oakland is, on the one hand, figuring out not to compete directly with San Francisco, which I think we've largely figured out, that's the last 20 years, I think we figured that out, not to do that anymore, that hasn't worked. But at the same time, when you're not doing that, how do we still have ambition for for addressing major problems, and that I don't think we figured that out either. We've kind of gone into a mode of doing things on a small scale in scattered sites and with mostly private input, right? Most of the buildings that you see going up in the last 20 years are private commercial buildings or private residential buildings. And so that's, I think, the question. How do we, learn from avoiding the excesses of that era of gigantic planning, and at the same time still being able to do some large scale plans when they make sense. And I think that's the moment we're at.
I don't know if you can stay a few minutes afterwards if people
Sure.
have more questions, but I would get one more question in here. Lois Corn asked about the influence of Black folk who were part of the Great Migration. You addressed it a little bit, but basically it was the Bay Area Planning Council. How is the influence of the Black, the Asian, the Latino communities effective over those later years?
I would say until the early 70s, they were not really effective. They were not really in the discussion. And gradually, I think partly because of the federal government mandate, starting in the late 60s, they start to mandate that, like, for instance, Oakland Citizens for Urban Renewal, the OCUR, right, which was a kind of parallel organization to the Oakland Redevelopment Authority, supposed to be a citizens advisory board next to it. It was basically a pro-business advisory board until the late 60s, early 70s. Afterward, it actually becomes a citizens group that actually starts to exert real pressure and saying, look, you can't go into West Oakland, build one freeway right through the middle of West Oakland, build a BART track right through the middle of our major commercial district, take out about a quarter of the entire West Oakland through urban renewal, build a gigantic regional park. You can't do these kind of things anymore. This is crazy. We have to, and so they largely succeed in stopping any other maddening plans for destroying West Oakland. So I think largely the community groups' first response was to stop plans that were utterly insensitive to their communities. And that's occurring during the 70s. And later to start to actually plan in conjunction with others for a more reasonable, outcomes. Like, for instance, the relocation of the Cypress Viaduct after the Loma Prieta. Instead of, Caltrans wanted it where it was, but the community worked with them to relocate it to the edge of West Oakland instead of going through the center of West Oakland. So that's a great example. Or the Fruitvale Transit Village, which was a community-inspired program, right, to actually start to build, in large part, to build on the BART parking lots, the first housing, right, in Oakland, right? That's really the beginning of that. So you start to see, but it's a later development, right, toward the end of the century.
Professor Schwarzer, we really thank you for being with us today. It was just an excellent presentation about kind of how we got to where we are, and maybe a little bit of vision to help us, as with history, will it repeat? Or we got to know our history to know how we got here before we go forward.
History tends not to repeat itself, but patterns repeat themselves.
It rhymes.
Yeah.
This year we're highlighting the new Rotary area of focus, the environment. In your honor, we're making a donation to the Environment Sustainability Rotary Action Group, SRAG, toward their focus on biodiversity, sustainable living, pollution, the climate, food systems, and a circular economy. We really thank you for being part of our Civic Thursday club meeting today. I did see a couple more bell ringers. I saw Ralph Sklar and Will Hobbs contributed towards ELITA. Let me get those in here. And
A total of 26 bell rings
great.
for ELITA.
And Tom Limon thanks you for that. We've now started giving towards Tom Limon's year. So CJ Hirschfield, are you out there? Could you tell us about next week's speaker?
DJ is not here.
Okay. Robert, could you
Yeah, I'm batting 0 for 2 here. Next week, instead of talking about big time stuff, big time like large buildings, like sea level change, this and that, we're going to be talking about little things. So little, in fact, we're going to be talking about the monarch butterfly. Terry Smith is the founder of Pollinators Posse, which and her she'll be talking about the plight of the monarch butterfly and what's being done to save their environment and their future. Next week, Terry Smith, right here at Rotary.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, District Assistant Governor Joe Goralka, for leading us with the pledge and thoughts for the day today. Past President and past District Governor Ed Jelen, thank you for introducing all of our guests. Sandeepa Rajamdari, thank you for sponsoring our meeting today with Local Foods. Past President Robert Kidd, thank you for introducing Elita. And Elita, so much thank you for not just being with us today, but for being with us. Thank you. Nancy Williams, again, happy birthday. And folks, don't forget Evolutionary Blues coming up next Thursday. Buy your tickets, buy 10 tickets, give them to a school, give them to the Oakland School for the Arts, give them to the Boys and Girls Club, but invite a guest too. Steve Nichols, thank you for introducing Professor Schwarzer, and thank you, Professor Schwarzer, for being with us. Thanks so much to our AV team today, Peter Sherris and Sandeepa, and I want to thank everybody out there for joining us today. Remember, we're Rotary, serve to change lives, and don't keep Rotary a secret. This meeting is adjourned. There we go.